You are listening to the Slow Living Podcast, and I'm your host, Stephanie O'Day. What if I told you that you could truly have the life of your dreams, the life you've always wanted, one filled with abundance, joy, and a sense of purpose? It's absolutely possible, and I see it each and every day with my coaching clients. It all starts with learning how to slow down. You deserve to live the life you've always dreamt about. Let's get started. Hi there, Slow Down Society. Steph here, and we're on episode 139 of the Slow Living Podcast. And today, we're going to talk about stressless eating because it's not fun to be stressed. And a big part of slowing down is going within and paying attention to your body and what she wants and what she needs. And yes, you have to feed her, and it does not have to be stressful. And so today I am thrilled that my friend Leanne is here. And Leanne and I met at a business conference and we hit it off pretty much instantaneously. She's one of the people who I didn't realize I needed and wanted in my life until all of a sudden we had breakfast together and we couldn't stop talking and the room emptied and we were alone in it, which is a little creepy and weird. But Leanne has an amazing program and I asked her to be on because I wanted her to share how her stressless eating program and plan works with you, because I know many of you are out there and you're writing to me and you're kind of at a crossroads. Maybe you're having a quarter life crisis, a midlife crisis. Maybe you are a newlywed or newly divorced, or your kids just moved out. But whatever it is, something has kind of woken you up and you're like, hey, this is my time. And I am ready to take care of me. And so that is why I'm like, Leanne, come talk to the people. So Leanne, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Absolutely. Okay. So this is how I got to know you, but what is your background? What is your story?
Yeah. So, I mean, just 30,000 foot overview, essentially. I grew up as a sedentary, overweight couch potato, but didn't even know that I was unhealthy. It was just kind of part of my life. So I grew up with depression and self-image and self-esteem struggles. And that actually manifested into me having a really dysmorphic relationship with my body and a disordered relationship with food. But again, I didn't know that. So fast forward to my early 20s, I hit my first, enough is enough point, where I had gained a significant amount of weight off the back of all of those struggles. And food was my coping mechanism. It was my best friend. It was my companion when I was lonely, when I was bored, when I was sad, all those things. And so I hit that wall where I was like, okay, I don't want to live like this anymore. And through a lot of the wrong ways and some of the right ways, I lost close to 100 pounds and made over my body. But in the midst of that, first of all, I had no idea that I had created such a toxic relationship with food to get there. But also when I got there, my self-image didn't catch up to the transformation that my body had gone through. And so I still had what I call now my fat goggles, and I'm putting those in air quotes because fat is just kind of what I was seeing myself through. It had become an identity. It had become a sense of, who I thought I was in the midst of and independent of my body. And so now keep in mind, I wasn't aware of this. And so at the time I was like, okay, I want to help other people lose weight because I had just lost all this weight. Everyone was asking me how to do it. And I was young and didn't know what I didn't know. And so instead of, the industry, the health and wellness and fitness industry is kind of the wild, wild west. Anybody can get into it. And I didn't want to just get a weekend certification. So I went back to school and I studied, nutrition and biomechanics and exercise science and all the things, learned way more in that period of my study than I did in all of my university years, started my own business and had a really successful fitness business right out of the gate because, the media loved the whole like fat girl to fit girl angle. It was very newsworthy. So I had this very successful business teaching again, I didn't know it at the time, but I was teaching them this eat less, move more mentality that I learned. But all of a sudden I'm on TV every single week. I'm CBS's, health and fitness expert. I'm in magazines and newspapers. This is like pretty much before Instagram was even a thing. But I had this kind of awareness at the height of my career of, oh my gosh, I am a prisoner to diets. I am a slave to workouts. There is something bigger that never got healed within me. But what do you do when you're teaching all of these women, how to eat less and move more, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, long story, a little less long. One of my first quarter life crises, I just had a conversation with God essentially, and I felt this pull to just shut it all down.
Yeah.
And so I had a very successful fitness business that I had, trainers working for me, and I was on TV and all these things. And people are like, wait, you're just going to shut that all down? And I'm like, yeah, and they're like, what are you going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to figure it out. And they're like, how are you gonna make money? I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to figure it out. But I just knew I couldn't do what I was doing any longer. And so I went and healed, and in the midst of this, I had been studying something that also happened was I had major spine surgery because I now call it the cost of skinny, because I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was so focused on getting lean and fit and hot and whatever words I was using at the time that I wasn't paying attention to my body, and ended up on a major on an operating table in Cleveland for major spine surgery. So that's what led me to study the nervous system. Meanwhile, I'm reconciling all the kind of psychological, emotional issues within me around food and my body. And that's when I was like, okay, this is the direction I need to go in, even if I don't know what it looks like. That was, 15 years ago ish. Is when this all started. I shut down my fitness business about 12 years ago. And fast forward to today, what does that look like? Well, stressless eating, for the millions of women that fell through the cracks like me, because I didn't ever get diagnosed with an eating disorder per se, but disordered eating. When you have disordered thinking about food and your body and yourself, your whole identity, your self-image is wrapped up in what you weigh or what you look like, and it doesn't stop there. It becomes any and external quantifiable. How much money you're making, recognition, how your relationship status, bank balance, how many likes you get on Instagram. I mean, we could go on, right? But for the millions of women like me who are falling through the cracks, and we're in this food and body prison, now what stressless eating does is I help them heal from that and really take a brain first, nervous system approach to healing their relationship with food, healing their relationship with their body, so they can break free of that food and body prison. And that's kind of the full circle story and Cliff Notes version of who I am and how I got to doing what I'm doing now.
Wow. Wow. It's interesting because it was fun for me chatting with you over this conference, and we were together 6 days. I felt like a very long time.
Yep.
But thoroughly enjoyed every bit of it. And while I was watching you, a lot of what you did resonated with me, and how you carried yourself, and comfortable on camera, and like, oh, okay, the mic pack. And so knowing that you did TV work, okay, well, it's all sort of making sense, because I'm like, so she already knows how to talk in sound bites, and all of this stuff. So you've definitely had media training, and at some point we could geek out on that, because that's a whole nother world of how to talk to cameras and carry yourself, and what angle is my chin at, and all of these things. But also the burning your business down because it didn't feel good inside your body anymore. I absolutely connected with, because I didn't want to be the crockpot lady for the rest of my life. And I most certainly didn't want to write pressure cooker recipes because I hate that gosh darn thing. But I had many people tell me when I was leaving money on the table and that I was wrong. And two, it was this sort of voice of God. For me, it was just because you can do something fast, it doesn't mean you should. And you had this other sort of voice of God, kind of reckoning. And a big part of slowing down is listening to that inner nudge, that inner guidance and stuff. And unfortunately, sometimes as women and little girls, we're sort of put in our place, and we're told, no, a good girl does this, or a proper woman or young adult does this. And we're dismissing those little voices and little nudges. And you're absolutely correct that there's this whole move more, eat less kind of thing. And we're sort of preached at for so long. And so how do you recognize what is kind of an internalized voice that we've just been spoken at our whole life, and what is actually kind of that inner guidance and nudge of what's right? Because I hate that intrusive thought of, gosh, Steph, should you really be eating that? Like that is quote unquote an inner voice, but it's toxic. And so how
Right.
do you know which ones to listen to?
Yeah, that's such a great question and such great points, because we download what we're told to think, and then when we think outside of it, we question it because if we're not certain in ourselves, we question, well, the society is talking about this, or the world's talking about this. So how do you distinguish, right? And so, there's a couple of places that my mind goes. The first one is like, is that inner talk for you? Is it working? Is it creating happiness? Is it creating freedom? Or is it taking you down the road of more of a prison? And if it is confining you and keeping you stuck in a prison where either it's not working and it's not contributing to your happiness or your health. Because a lot of women, I know for me, I was chasing air quotes skinny, or I was chasing lean, or whatever words I was using. And it was at the expense of my health and at the expense of my happiness and at the expense of being skinny at the end of the day, because it left me in this binge restrict cycle. Not that skinny is the thing I'm chasing anymore anyways, but none of it, I didn't get any of it. Right.
Yeah.
So that would be the first.
So,
Yeah.
so let's circle and highlight what you just said, because
Yeah.
skinny does not equal healthy and skinny does not equal happy.
Right. Yeah. And that's the thing. I think when we don't know who we are, so it could come from because we don't know who we are because we have food and body struggles, or it could become from these quarter life or midlife crises where we're like, who am I? If I'm not a mom anymore, if I'm not, in this role at work anymore, if I'm not in this marriage anymore, if I'm not any of these roles that I took on, it's almost this like, who am I question. And so we cling on to that. And so we cling on to whatever we know. For me, it was the body stuff, right? But some women, it's other coping mechanisms. Some women, it's just, hey, you tell me who to think I am because I don't know, right? They look for other people to tell them that. So, I think there's this distinction when we chase these things that we think will make us happy. It really comes from this place of like, does this really make me happy? Or is it a facade of I'm chasing what somebody else, what society told me was happy, what I think air quotes should make me happy. Or then we feel like, I know a lot of women like feel like we're broken. Because well, wait a minute. I downloaded the story. I chased the happiness trail and I'm here and I'm feeling miserable. What is that? And so what I discovered for me was that what needed to happen was I actually needed to strip myself of those external things that I thought were going to make me happy and really go inward. And that's where all of this kind of self-imaging started.
Yeah. So if someone's listening to this and they're like, okay, you're absolutely describing me and I don't know who I am. And I do kind of want to like do a control alt delete and start afresh. What is the first step I should take?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is one of the big things I go through with my clients. And, first and foremost, I have to kind of like unbrainwash them of the kind of diet mentality that they picked up: to eat less, move more, good, bad, right, wrong, should, shouldn't, shame, blame, guilt, comparisonitis, all of that. So that's really, step one and really phase one. But when it comes into this deeper self-imaging stuff, when we talk about really shifting your identity and taking on a new identity, the first thing that I do, and this is always the most challenging for my clients, especially women in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, who all they've been is to or for someone else. And they think it's air quotes selfish to take care of themselves. So sometimes that's the first barrier we have to get through is like, no, this is not selfish. It's the least selfish thing that you can do because the other people that are in line to get your time, energy, attention, and care, they need you to be wholehearted and filled up. But that being said, the first thing I do is I say, hey, just for a moment, shed the layers of who you think you are as a mom, a wife, a sister, an employer, an employee, a caretaker, whatever, all of those roles that we play, and just come back to who you are, the essence of who you are as a woman, a heart, a soul. Because here's the thing. If we do it in reverse and I try to go be everything I think I need to be as a sister, a wife, a mom, a whatever, by extension, I'm not necessarily going to be able to go and give that to myself. Right. And then not only that, I'm resentful of giving my time and attention to other people because I don't have it for myself. Right. Versus if you strip it away and you go decide who you want to be in every area of your life, as a heart, as a soul, as the essence of you, the woman, or the men, if you're listening to this podcast, right? Maybe there's a few of them out there. Right.
Because once in a while they email me and they're like, I am here. I'm like, okay, you are seen and thank you.
Totally. That's how my podcast is. I'm like, to the women here and the two men. No, I'm just kidding. No, but it really is this universal experience, right? But that being said, when you come back and you strip yourself of those roles and you start it at you, by extension, you will go show up as that version of yourself, as a wife, as a sister, as a mom. But it's so hard because people get stuck in the identity of like, hey, if I'm not needed, who the heck am I? And that's a hard that's a hard onion to peel for some people. And that's where it's a decision where you have to make that decision of like, no, I'm done letting that be an indicator of my worth, the hustling, the doing for others, the checklist, the to-do list. And I'm ready to identify who that is. First, it's got to be this kind of decision that you make of like, I'm no longer willing to sit on the sidelines of my life and pretend any longer. And that's hard, but it's harder not to.
It is. It's interesting because a lot of what you're saying, we talk about in the Peace course, and so like we don't even bring in relationships for quite a while because you need to know who you are first before you bring in other humans and variables you can't control.
Totally.
So if someone's like, okay, Leanne, I hear all of this and I like this in theory, but in real life, I have to go to work every day and I hate it. And I don't feel like it's part of my identity and something I want to do, but I also need to make money. And then I still have to like feed the other humans in the house. And if my brain is telling me I should eat more vegetables, but the other humans in the house refuse to, like how do I do all these things and take care of myself first when there are all this other stuff that I have to do?
For sure. For sure. I think a lot of people, and I know I used to, we wait for the right time to do stuff like this, and what do they say? Like, don't make decisions when you're hungry or mad. Right. And it's like, well, don't make this decision, this big, massive decision about who you want to be in the midst of all of this threat. You know what I mean? Or all of these stresses or outside circumstances that feel like you're coming from that place. So part of it is like, yes, in order to become the next level version of yourself, you do have to carve out that time and make that time. But one of the things that I talk about with my clients is a lot of their time and energy and mental real estate is going towards programming and conditioning the old ways of thinking that are keeping them stuck in that prison. So if all you do, instead of like thinking about like, oh, I need to spend all this extra time, it's like, no, what if you recaptured or took back the power from all of that time and energy that you're spending going down downward spirals and just redirected it? So in ways, when you're following the right system of thinking that actually changes your brain, it's not extra time, it's just reprogramming and refocusing, right? But that being said, there's always, what do they say? And I don't mean this in a like, oh, if you want it badly enough, you'll do it kind of way, but there's always an excuse, for people that are non-committed. And for the ones that are committed, there's always a way. They'll always find a way. Right. And so that's the other side of it too, is like, you want to make sure that whatever it is that you're recommitting to does not take all of your time, energy, mental real estate and make you become a version of yourself just to get there. Like that's not the way either. So the way that you go about creating these transformations absolutely matters, right? Now, when it comes to the level of air quotes sacrifice that you're making, like, do I just jump off the cliff and go follow my dreams and get a new job? Well, how do I eat vegetables if my kids just want chocolate cake for dinner? All of those things, right? They're going to be very individualized conversations with different individualized people. And that's why we're never going to get our answers from a book or, an e-course without like somebody really, without like the actual awarenesses that we need. But that being said, when it comes to like, for me, former versions of myself, she jumped off the cliff without a parachute. Now, in hindsight, I probably caused a lot of suffering for myself of not knowing how I was going to make money and not knowing what I was going to do next. And would I maybe not have pulled the trigger so quickly? Yes and no. Like, yes, because, it was more challenging for me in the long run, but it made me build my parachute on the way down. And that's such an individualized personal experience when it comes to like, do I sacrifice my livelihood in order to follow my dream? Because that's one conversation. But the other kinds of conversations of like, how do I eat green beans when, my kids are eating chocolate cake? That's the kind of thing where this is one of those things where we can't just wait for everybody to get in line. Right. And so one of the things I ask my clients when they do, before we go to, decide to work together, is if I do hear them saying, well, yeah, but my husband this and my kid this, one of the things I'll ask them, I say, are you ready to take radical ownership of what you can influence about you, independent of what you can't influence about others? And that's where the difference between personal responsibility versus blaming others and excuses. Right. And so that's why it's so individualized to like, which is a very different answer than to what I said about leaving your job to follow your dreams. Two different, you know what I'm saying? So it's just, but this is where it comes back to personal responsibility, no shame and no like hustling for your worthiness, kind of like go get them, just do it anyways kind of mentality, but really coming back to like, what can I influence and what can I release that I have no control over?
Hey there. Are you looking for an easier way to meet your goals without sacrificing your ethics or morals? If so, you're going to want to check out the new masterclass I recorded on how to achieve more by learning how to slow down. I know it sounds like an oxymoron, but I promise you that this is a proven system that works. If you're ready to finally meet your personal and professional goals without sacrificing yourself or your sanity, check out this new recording at stephanieoday.com/masterclass. Okay, back to this week's episode. I like paying more attention to health, like just health with a capital H
Yes.
versus like aesthetic things. And for me, mental health and physical health are in tune. So my
Yeah.
mental health suffers if I have too much sugar, or if I'm having too much alcohol, or if I'm not sleeping enough. And it's tricky when my mental health isn't all that to pay attention to my physical health because I'm run down and worn out and I don't necessarily make the best decisions. So if wherever you are, if you're listening to this, if you're thinking, well, I'm not in the best mental capacity to do good things, paying attention to your overall health fixes both sides of your brain and then also your body, because in my mind, mental health and physical health are exactly the same thing. It's capital H health. And I like your idea of if not now, then when. So there will be never a perfect time to do anything because there's no such thing as perfect. And so just when you've had enough, today is the day. Like this is the line in the sand and crossing it. And Leanne, I know you've got a wealth of information on your site, but then you also have a webinar that you walk people through. What's that look like?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for asking. Well, one thing that you just said that is just so powerful. I want to just brag on you because I love that you share with your listeners this concept, and it kind of coincides with what you said about, how do we know when we're listening to other people's voices and the chatter in our head? I think the definition of health is what you just brought up with the capital H is so powerful because oftentimes that's what we have to do. We have to redefine what health actually means. Because if health is just this physical conversation or it's this what we eat or how we move conversation, we totally miss out on the mental, emotional, spiritual, social things that actually really contribute to it all. And that's, kind of bringing into the question that you just asked. That's a lot of where what stems from what really inspired me to create this masterclass, this webinar, where, stressless eating is really this three-dimensional health of like, let's look at it first and foremost from a brain-centered and nervous system approach, because oftentimes, the nervous system actually outvotes what we think is healthy. And it's saying, well, actually, no, that's you're sacrificing your health. You're sacrificing your mental well-being to pursue this worldly, definition of health that has just gotten exacerbated by social media. And that's another conversation on its own, right? But that being said, I believe that when we stop solving the wrong problem, which is what we think is in our body, and we start solving the right problem and we get on the same page as our brain and our nervous system, and that includes our emotional health, our social health, our spiritual health, all of it, that's when we can start making strides. And that's what my entire webinar is about, is turning off the part of your brain that's obsessing over what you eat, how you move, what you look like, your weight, all of that. And it's like, well, that sounds great in theory. How do I do that? Well, let's show you how to do that. Solve the right problem. Take a brain first, health centric approach, health with a capital H approach.
Yeah, it's interesting. So food noise, you and I have discussed food noise before. And then when I flew home, I was thinking about it and I was jotting down some notes. And then I got off the plane. I started talking to my husband about food noise. He's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. I'm like, okay, great. But then the next day on the phone, I'm on the phone with my girlfriend, Jennifer, who I talk to every day. Hi, Jen, if you're listening. And I'm like, well, and then Leanne, like she and I just hit it off and we are talking about food noise. And she's like, what's food noise? And I'm like, well, when you wake up and you're like, well, what am I going to eat today? And then while you're eating, you're thinking about, well, what's the next thing I'm going to eat? And how many calories is this? And well, if I had this chocolate donut, that means I can't have this. And do I say yes to the free iced coffee? Because I mean, this parent and this is both because we both work in a school, and so parents bring us stuff, and it's really hard to say no to free food.
Right.
But and she's like, oh, I have that all day long. I'm like, I know, that's food noise. And Leanne
Yes.
helps you learn how to turn it off.
Absolutely. Well, it's one of those things, you don't understand a problem that you've never had. You know, if I burn my finger on the stove, I know what it feels like to burn my fingers. But if I skin my knee on the concrete, that's a very different type of pain that if I've never burned my fingers, skinning my knee on the concrete won't teach my brain what it feels like to burn my fingers, right? And so it comes up, and not that this is a man versus woman conversation, but because of the part of our brain that obsesses over food in our body is actually bigger and more active in the female brain, this is going to be a lot more common when it comes to women. Doesn't mean men don't have it either, but oftentimes, like, that's one of the conversations, one of the questions I'll ask my clients before is like, hey, does your husband know what a deep emotional struggle this is for you? Or does he think it's an eat less, move more, I need more willpower thing? And oftentimes they're like, he's like, oftentimes they're like, he knows I struggle, but he doesn't get it. And that's what I say. I'm like, it's so hard for a man to get behind his wife and help her solve a problem that he doesn't fully understand that she has. And so that's where it's like, we don't know what we don't know. We can't see what we can't see. But also, the other problem is that a lot of people think food noise is actually a food problem, or it's a weight problem. And that's where I feel like we're solving the wrong problem. It's in our brain, it's in our psyche, it's in our thoughts and beliefs and behaviors that cause this recipe that creates the food noise. Food noise is really a downstream symptom of something deeper going on in our brain. And that's where it's like, we have to solve the right problem, but we can't do that if we're calling ourselves crazy or thinking that we're weird because we're the only people that suffer like this. And it's like, no, it's a pandemic in itself. You know what I mean? Like, there's millions and millions of women. I'm talking about women specifically, men too, but that struggle with this. And then there's added shame because they think they're crazy or they think they're the only one that does it, you know, and you're just so not alone in that.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. And also, I mean, I'm 5 feet. So physically, I literally need less food than many other people. And if you're paying attention to that and you're aware of it, and sometimes you talk about that out loud, other people immediately tell you to be quiet or shame you or tell you you've got an eating disorder and that kind of stuff. We're literally, if I'm just quiet and I listen and I think, am I even hungry right now? Often I'm not. But if I say, well, I've met my caloric allotment for the day, you're immediately like, alert, eating disorder, when it's actually just a fact that I happen to know that Costco muffin is 475 calories. That is a lot on a 5-foot frame. And I'm not shaming anyone else who is not 5 feet. You get to decide whatever you want to do with your allotment. But for me, my body will not feel as good if I eat that versus if I have a nice smashed avocado toast with a hard-boiled egg. That's the same amount of calories, but it will sustain me for so long. And I can do my run after work and I can do the things and I can reset the laundry and goof around in the backyard with the kids. And again, I have literally no judgment because I teach and believe in unconditional universal love. I am not blaming or shaming anyone for any of their choices. But then also at times I put a bubble in my mouth because I know I can't talk in some circles in some way without other people feeling badly about themselves. Same with like deciding to not drink if I'm going out with a group of friends, me deciding not to drink only because I know I've got to get up at 4 a.m. to coach.
Right.
It wouldn't be good for me. Then all of a sudden they're starting to justify their reasonings. And then that in turn makes me feel bad. And then that makes me cycle and not like cycle like in a uterine way, but cycle in like a brain,
the rabbit hole.
Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, well, I will have a glass of rosé just so then they don't make me feel bad. But then I in turn feel bad. And then it's all nuts. So tell me, Leanne, how do I stop all that?
Well, it's so valuable what you just said. There's two really important things that you brought up. You know, first and foremost, like it's the distinction between something being a tool and a weapon, right? Like you can literally look at calories as a tool to help you distinguish, you know, what's a better choice for you, what serves you more, what doesn't serve you, or it can be a weapon of control and dysfunction and shame and disorder, right? It's not that anything is good, right, bad, or wrong. It's just that like who we're being when we're using it and our perception and our thoughts about it are what absolutely influence it. And that's where there's no black and white. It's for everyone, to have a personal, individual, I hate to say like relationship with calories or relationship with the scale, but it really is, because we don't just have this benign relationship. It becomes this emotional thing, especially if you've have historically created emotional ties with it. That's where I feel like it's our responsibility and our right to really take our power back from that, so that it can just be a tool where I use it and say, hey, that's 475 calories that I would get so much more sustenance if I have the avocado toast, right? But the other side of it, which I'm so glad that you brought up, is so important. You know how I said that the part of the brain that is bigger in females and more active in females is responsible for where a lot of our self-image lives? It's also responsible where a lot of our physiological and emotional pain receptors live, and therefore why we medicate it with food or Netflix or shopping or whatever our drug of choice is. I've used them all. There's no shame, right? But we just want to know what our drug of choice is. Well, that being said, it's the same part of our brain that has what I call third-party goggle awareness. So it's one thing if I have an awareness of me not drinking, but then if I have an awareness that somebody else might have an awareness, and how much I actually like value their opinion, or whether or not I am more like valuing my own opinion of it, is determined by that social brain. And what I found, that women that struggle with food and body image struggles and the social and the self-image and body image side of it, their social brain is going to be hyperactive as well. They're going to care how much you care about your decision-making process. They're going to care how much you care about whether I didn't eat that muffin or drink that alcohol, versus like having that personal choice and being self-endorsed and knowing that you can be unapologetic about it. That's a big part of the work that has to be like kind of repaired as well in our brains, because we have that hyperactive social brain, which not coincidentally, but it makes sense now, is the part of our brain that reaches for food when we're not even hungry and hyper obsesses over the scale. So it's all interrelated.
Yeah. Well, and from like a very rudimentary evolutionary standpoint, you don't want to get kicked out of the tribe. And if you're doing something different and the tribe thinks you're weird, they're going to vote you off the island.
Right. Yeah. But also there's that like, do you have your own back kind of thing? Because there's those like third party awarenesses where it's like, well, that person's judging me. And is it one of those things where it's like, oh my gosh, they're judging me, I must be wrong? Or is it one of those things where it's like, they're judging me, but I know who I am, and I'm so confident and clear in who I am and my values, and like I have my own inner compass, that like it's not my circus, not my monkeys, and I'm not going to make them wrong for judging me, but I'm not going to take it on. I'm not going to download it. And that's the power that we have as well, So it's not either or, it can be both. And sometimes it's our own perception of their perception. Sometimes it's actually their perception. And that's where we need those distinctions and those goggles in our self-image to know the difference.
Yeah. I like everything you're saying. And I love the, not my circus, not my monkeys. I use that pretty often. I said that earlier today on a call.
Yep. A lot of monkeys in the room.
There's so many monkeys. Well, and also if you're listening to this and you're realizing, okay, so I am a people pleaser. Am I actually going against my own gut and intuition because of that? And let me think about that and unpack that for a while. Sometimes doing a tiny bit of kind of inner child work and realizing where this came from is valuable. Maybe some of your caregivers might not have perhaps either modeled the best choices, or perhaps they weren't meeting your emotional needs, or they were projecting who they were on you. But and all of that is fixable. So definitely do some inner child work. Go within. If you need to reach out to your doctor or therapist, do that. Because it's fixable, and who you are at 20, 30, 40, 50 is not exactly who you are. You can constantly sort of tweak and fine tune and develop. And all of us had some baggage. Maybe we had a parent, a teacher, a caregiver, someone said something to us and it got stuck in our brain and we're still ruminating on it 20, 30 years later. That's fixable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
and
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love all the points you're bringing up. I'm like, this is so valid,
Well,
because
this is why we vibe so
right.
much.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind too, like when something happened in our childhood and we don't reconcile it and then we bring it with us into our present and into our future, what happens is if there's some sort of emotional need that wasn't met. And so
Yeah.
if we don't know how to be emotionally available to ourselves, like for me, that's where I started from a very young age, firing and wiring sugar and cable TV to meet my emotional needs. And then I became an adult and all of a sudden I'm in my 20s, 30s, and 40s. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I get here? Well, it's this, like when you say it's fixable, you don't have to stay this way. What does have to happen is we need to understand how to become emotionally available to ourselves in the present moment.
Yeah.
And that's a skill that anybody can learn anytime. But it doesn't happen. It's not going to get reconciled through a diet. It's not going to get reconciled even through like just meditation. Like you've got to go unfire and rewire new thought patterns and processes and learn the skill set of being emotionally available to yourself in the moments. And it's kind of like adulting ourselves so that we're not stuck as a victim to our coping mechanisms that sometimes we learn from a very young age. And sometimes they're not as benign as Netflix or online shopping. Sometimes they're drugs, they're alcohol, food can really keep us in a prison, all of it, leaving us even more shame because then we feel great. Now I'm an addict and I'm so codependent on this substance or this thing to fill something for me. And then we feel alone and crazy and the cycle continues, so it's so important what you're saying and for us to take radical ownership of it and without shame, really just acknowledge I didn't know what I didn't know. And this is just what happened to my brain, but really acknowledging it and attending to it, like taking care of it right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, in parenting, they talk about how you need to teach your infants and your toddlers to self-soothe. And
Yes,
depending
an adulthood too.
I know, depending on my mood, I'm like, really, can a 3-month-old self-soothe?
Exactly.
Let's figure that out. So anyway,
but a 47-year-old absolutely can.
yeah. In hopefully in a healthy way, but also sometimes,
right.
You had brought up meditation and affirmations and things like that. And I recorded an earlier episode on that. Sometimes healing the inner child, when you do an affirmation, really what you want is a parent, a caretaker to tell you that you're lovely and you're wonderful and you're worthy. And so if chanting an affirmation of I am worthy doesn't feel good to you, then shift it. Be your own caretaker and pet yourself. It sounds so silly, but if you like physically pet yourself, like, it's okay, Steph. You're going to be okay. You're worthy. You're lovely. You're precious. You're amazing. And talk to yourself as if then you're that 6-year-old, 10-year-old, 14-year-old, however you're old.
I love that you say that you're giving them permission to shift it too, because what happens is resonance is what makes or breaks whether something downloads in our brain permanently or if we just kind of call BS on it. And so if you're telling yourself something and it doesn't resonate with you, it's literally going to lay down something called negative neuroassociations. Your brain isn't going to download it. But that's where it's like, wait a minute, this doesn't feel true, but this could feel true. And you're shifting it. And then talking about like physiological sensory driven touch, like talk about even more powerful positive neuroassociation. So you're so spot on. Like it's got to be so individualized. And that's why even things like meditation and affirmations, such powerful tools, but you're right. They've got to shift so that they're individualized, that they resonate and meet you where you are.
Yeah. So I think that's why you and I are such a huge fan of one-on-one coaching and the one size doesn't fit all approach. And we both kind of joked that we'd be better marketers if we were comfortable looking into a camera and BSing people like 6 weeks to rock star abs, do it this way and it will work no matter what. Like that just doesn't work. So how can someone work with you one-on-one if everything you're saying is like, okay, this is the answer. This is what I've been searching for. I need Leanne in my life.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking, first of all. And if you want to get 6-pack abs in 6 seconds, no, I'm just kidding. So yeah, one of the things I say is like, don't take my word for it. Try on what I have to say, try on the thought processes. And the simplest way to do that would be to watch my masterclass. If you go to stresslesseating.com, basically I peeled back the curtain of literally the exact system that I created and that change my own life and transform me into the human I am today. But I've been teaching it, for over a decade now to other women to really rewire your brain, to turn off the part of your brain that is obsessed with food or your body or your weight, and learn how to heal it, not in a short-term band-aid fashion, but really heal it, but also by becoming the version of yourself that would think that way, live that way. It's an entire self-image identity based approach to healing your brain, because the food and body stuff really is just a downstream symptom of all of that. So what I would say is go check out the masterclass, the webinar, see if it resonates with you. And if it does, there's instructions on there on how to get in touch with me and set up a call, and we can see if it's a fit. And either way, I'll let you know if I can help you. And either way, I'll let you know if I can't, and I'll point you in the direction of who I think would be the best fit to serve you moving forward. But either way, that masterclass, even if we don't ever talk, will give you an awareness and help you see what you're not seeing so that you can start solving the right problem.
Okay. And we will absolutely link to all of that in the show notes. Leanne, as always, I think you are amazing and wonderful and such a brush. Oh, I said brush. So we could edit that out, but we probably won't. I meant breath and fresh all in the same word,
I
which
love
is
it.
brush. Yeah. Coming soon to a salon near you, brush.
Yeah. A brush of fresh air. I'll receive that, because you're a brush of fresh air as well. So thank you for having me. And thank you I love that our thoughts align. And this is just, there's so much, symbiosis to what we're sharing. And I'm just grateful that you have me on here. So thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, pretty people, consider yourself loved and hugged. I think you are absolutely wonderful. And I will talk to you again next week in your earbuds. Do you have a slow living story to share? Leave me a voicemail at stephanieoday.com/podcast with any questions, comments, feedback, or testimonials, and I will be sure to include it in an upcoming episode. Also, if you found value in this episode, please share it with your family and friends and subscribe through your favorite podcast provider. The more you share, comment, and leave positive reviews, the more people we can reach and share the slow living lifestyle and messaging. Thank you, Slow Down Society, and have an absolutely wonderful day.